I am presenting this PowerPoint lecture going over Chapter 2 of Flat World Knowledge, How to Use Microsoft Excel Career and Practice series. Based on some feedback, I want to make certain that the presentation does have a much more clear presentation and you can understand and hear everything that I'm saying. Chapter 2 is mathematical computations. We'll be going through quite a number. Obviously, you know the sum feature and also um, you know a number of the very, very standard and commonly used formats. But we're going to dig a little deeper than that and we're going to be using some of our skills that we already know, but we're going to be building on that from Chapter 1. The objective of this chapter is to learn how to create basic formulas, understand referencing, and how to copy. And this is going to be really important because when you're copying and pasting formulas, sometimes they don't come over correctly and you have to modify them. Well, we're going to be using relative referencing so that our copy function can be most efficient. We'll be working with some complex formulas and dealing with the order of operations. As you know, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and division, and using exponents. They all have operational order within mathematics. So we'll be manipulating that to get our computations to give us the operation or the result that we want to achieve. We're going to review some auditing tools within the Excel workbook and the sum function to calculate. And everybody knows the sum function, but you know this is just the the basic of using Excel. Absolute references is important as well, and that's going to be something that we probably don't need to use all the time because depending on the complexity of our workbooks, but it becomes necessary to understand some more deeper functions and mathematical computations in Excel just to make our workbooks more complex and more easy to use and more efficient. We will be using the average, count, and max and min function. There are so many different functions that we're going to be using within this chapter, none of which are hard. In fact, I would say 50% of them you probably already use in some form or another, but then there may be a few that are new for you and you will probably need a little bit of help. There are a number of opportunities for video tutorials, skill builders that I would suggest you reference to help you better understand the functions that you don't use every day. And we're going to also learn how to set multiple sequences for data sets. And this is just making our workbook a little bit more efficient, but also a little bit more complex. And again, the activities in this chapter are very, very useful. And you may have a good working knowledge of a number of these functions, but let's put new functions together with our learning and see how we can expand our workbooks and make them more complex and much more data driven. And we'll talk about how to handle loans and using the PMT function, how to calculate payments on whether it be a mortgage or a lease, even a car payment. And this might be helpful because when you're out there trying to look for a car and you're deciding, well, I'm going to buy a car, it might be a new car, it might be an old car. I don't know, but I do know what my number is, what I'm working with. This payment function does help you learn how to calculate based on the interest rate they're giving you, how to calculate the payments. And that's important because when you're budgeting, when you want to make certain that you have enough money each month to pay your car payment or your house and to pay other bills. So it's useful. It has very practical use. We're going to talk about the time value of money, and we all know about money. Our currency is dollar, but the time value of money is attached to a interest rate. And what is the value of money in the future if we put aside a certain amount today? So the concept of the time value of money is going to be quite important for us in this chapter and in your work and everyday living. We're going to use the future value function and also calculate the personal investments. Again, in light of time value of money, we want to know what our present value of $5 is 10 years from now, 6 months from now. And we'll be using the future value function to do that. And we will be doing some what if scenarios. These may sound like new items that you probably have not heard about or have not tackled in Excel, but let me assure you they are easy, they are very intuitive, and I don't think you'll have any problems at all in this chapter. So calculating formulas, there are basic formulas. Obviously, the sum function is the most basic of formulas. But you're going to use that to calculate a variety of different outputs, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. The most basic is going to be the adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing. But then it gets a little bit more complicated because it depends on how the order of those calculations will be presented in your spreadsheet works, your cell, to give you what you need. The mathematical operators, which I just mentioned, are a little different when they're used in Excel, but we'll go through those and help you construct a basic formula that gives you the outcome that you look for. Using cell references is important because it allows you to produce the output and the references and how they can change based on if you copy it from one place to another. And you'll see, and you've probably seen that quite a bit when you have a cell and you calculated some type of formula in that cell, and then you copy it, and how the Excel program automatically adjusts the references or the cell of the cell reference based on the new cell that you've copied that particular formula into. Universal constants, they do not change. These are values that in a formula that you don't want to change. And that's important too, because what happens is when you're doing a calculation based on a cell that's all the way at the top of your workbook, but you don't want that particular value to change. Universal constants are important to note how we can use those so that we can make certain allocations stay the same, and that we can keep our information, keep our reference on that one cell the same regardless of how many places we copy that function. And as I mentioned, Excel automatically changes the cell reference based on its original location and when it's pasted to another location, unless you tell it otherwise. And we can talk about that when we talk about absolute values. But once it's copied, it does make that change. And you've seen it before. We may not know how or what the technical term is called, but relative referencing is what's happening. For example, if I say I want to add cell A1 through A6, and I want to post that in A7, and then I go over to the next column, and then I go to the next column onto the B column, and I want to make that same calculation. I copy it from the A7 cell to the B7 cell, and what it did is it not only it added B1 to B6, not A1 to A6. So the referencing, what it does is it copies the formula itself, but it changes the references. In this case, from A1 to A6 to B1 to B6, and copied it into B7. And you do this all the time without thinking twice. But now we're starting to put technical jargon to the types of functions and type of things that we're doing within Excel. And that's a good thing. And it's very convenient. For the most part, relative referencing is going to be done without even thinking twice. There are times when you can't use relative referencing because you want to make certain that your worksheet has the same cell being referenced. But for the most part, it's very, very convenient. It makes our copy and paste function seamless without a hitch. So, does your output of your formula make sense? One of the things I think is most important when doing any type of workbook and would have calculations in it is when you get your output, when you get the value in that cell, does it make sense? Does it truly give you what you're looking for? Don't just assume just because the worksheet is able to add, multiply, and divide like you say that's the formula is correct. So you really have to do your integrity check. And most of the time, it's not really a difficult thing to do. But when your worksheets get more complicated, it is very important that you make certain of the accuracy of your workbooks. Check the formula, make sure it makes sense in light of your entire worksheet. Now, we talk about order of operations, and order of operations is a foundation for mathematics, and we all know this. But there are times when the order of operations is not going to be what we want to get what we need in our calculation. And we control that by using parentheses. And this is done mainly in very complex formulas, which you will see in Chapter 3. In Chapter 2 and 2, we will introduce some use of complex formulas, but for the most part, Chapter 3 will be dealing with very, very complicated formulas using various different functions in one cell. So it's important to understand how to use parentheses within Microsoft Excel to get you the output that you need. Auditing formulas. Trace precedence and trace dependence. I did not before many years ago. I never really thought about trace precedence and trace dependence and how to audit. But this is a really important function within Excel because it allows you to be able to track what you've done and to ensure the accuracy of what you've done. And it's a neat feature, not used all the time, but it's something that you really should consider when you're doing your own workbooks in your workplace or in school. So, what do you think? Which of the following terms best describes the reason why Excel is able to change the outputs of a formula and the functions when one or more inputs are changed? Which term do you think is best? Is it absolute references? Is it cell references? Is it relative references? Is it dynamic output referencing? I think it's going to be relative referencing. What do you think? Now, the second question is which of the following best describes the proper use of numbers when constructing formulas in Excel? The numbers cannot be used in the construction of a formula. You can only use cell locations. You cannot combine numbers and cell locations in a formula. This will produce an error. Or numbers should always be used when creating formulas in Excel, or numbers should be used when constructing formulas with constants that do not change, such as days of weeks, months, and years. Which one do you think is the right answer? Another question. Now, looking at this cell and all the parentheses that follow, which of the following will be calculated first in the formula that's listed? Think about it. So, the main objective as we read through this chapter and as we continue through working on mathematical computations is the effective use of formulas and the effective use of parentheses when we're trying to calculate our formulas. These questions are very basic, and as you read through, you'll find that they are quite easily understood and easily to determine. Now, the integrity check, cell ranges and statistical functions. There are, I don't know, I would say 100 statistical functions within Microsoft Excel, and we may not use half of them. They are separated by category. One is called they are so vast. One is financial, one is statistical. I mean, there are so many different types of functions within Excel. So the most important thing when we're dealing with having to create mathematical computation is what function is necessary to give us what we need. What type of function? Will it be a statistical function? Will it be a true false type of function? Maybe, so we need to walk in the door knowing kind of how we want to present the information and what functions are going to be necessary to get what we're anticipating. But the most important thing is the use of a comma is going to be critical on how you use a comma when you're creating your statistical function. So the sum function is the most common, and obviously we can see that on the top of your screen. It's the auto sum, and it gives you this kind of weekly line, but it's used to calculate a group of cells, and it's going to calculate a total. So basically, it's adding. Now, absolute references. This is a great feature when you don't want you don't want relative referencing. You don't want to change the cell reference when you're calculating a formula and you're copying it from one place to another. So using absolute references keeps something fixed in place. It shuts off the relative referencing feature, and it prevents a cell from being referenced somewhere else. It locks the cell, basically. It's a great feature when you want to be able to I call it anchor down. When you want to anchor down a specific cell and you want to copy that specific cell all the way down and not allow Excel to change the reference in that cell. It's a great tool, and it truly does help when you need when you're not concerned about it changing from one cell to another when you copy and paste, but you want it to stay fixed in place. So we're going to go through that in a number of activities in this chapter. The count function is another function that's going to be used in this chapter and in others, and it just tells you how many items are in a cell range, and it doesn't matter if it's numeric or text. Another statistical function is the average function, and again, it is more or less calculating the average of a group of numbers, and you can give that, obviously, it's going to be the equal sign, which activates the function, and you're going to put add as your function name. But at the end of the day, if you want to get the mean or the average of a specific range of cells, that function is useful. When you're dealing with a lot of information, getting the lowest and the highest information data is important. And using this function, you can do that without having to scan through massive amounts of information in your database. We use copy and paste all the time, and it is a great opportunity for us to efficiently move and navigate through our workbooks by copying and pasting information. It definitely makes data entry simpler, easier, faster. Sorting is important when you're dealing with a lot of information. You can sort by category, you can sort by cell, you can sort by totals. You give it specific types of information that you want to be the driver of how the information is presented on the screen. It's very, very important function, and it allows you to sort information so that you can see or and analyze trends in your data. And again, when you're talking about data that's extremely voluminous, the sorting feature just truly helps you out a lot. And here are some questions that you should be able to answer once you've gone through the chapter. And this question is asking you if this formula equals C2 divided by $C $24. The dollar sign used in the C24 cell reference indicate what? What does it tell you when you see that dollar sign? And I'm going to put my cursor right there with a dollar sign here and here. What is that doing? Think about it before you answer. And again, these are not real tricky. I just think once you read through the chapter, these answers will be very, very intuitive. So the next question in this section is going to ask you again what statement best explains how the following function will produce a result. Average, B1, comma, B10. And think about the answer before you respond. But as you're reading through, think about what kinds of function will produce an answer to this particular function here. The next question I think you should be able to consider once you read through is which of the following best explains or following explains how data in a workbook can be sorted if the primary column of data contains several duplicate values. And this one here is more like integrity check because it's really trying to make certain that you sort information in such a way that you can detect those things instead of having to scan through an entire workbook, which can be voluminous already. Using the sort function can help you. So sorting data is going to be important because worksheets sometimes become extremely complex, not so much because of the functions that's involved, because of the massive information that it contains. The PMT function is called the payment function, and it's the fundamentals of how to determine what amount to be paid, what a payment amount is, given some scenarios. And we're going to use it for the fundamentals of loans and leases. And everybody in this classroom would obviously know about loans. We had one at one point in time, or we currently have one. And it's good to know how organizations like banks can determine what your payment will be based on the interest rate, based on the time, and based on all the criteria that they determine your credit worthiness. So that's important. And you would be very gifted to know how much you're going to pay on your loan before you take it out. And you can know beforehand if you can fit that into your budget. And we'll talk about budgets later on in this class. And we will have a number of opportunities to create payment amounts based on how in calculating leases, calculating payment for a mortgage. So that's going to be so much fun, and it's going to be so practical, which is what I love about Excel. Linking worksheets, we are going to be working on linking one worksheets to another, all within the same workbook. Then we could also learn how to link workbooks to another workbook and using cell referencing and others to calculate formulas. So this is going to be the neat part about Excel, just getting a little bit more, taking up a little bit more, and linking out worksheets within a workbook. And that's one way is creating summary pages, creating different types of things. So you'll see that with your skill building activities and your video demonstrations. Time value of money, we all know this because we're in accounting. Time value of money is the value. How do we determine what money is now based on the future number that we're given, or how much money will be in the future, given our rate of interest, timing of how the money is going to be calculated, or the number of payments, and how do we determine if we're going to make money or we're going to lose money. So time value of money is important, and we're going to go through that in this chapter. Future value, FV function is going to be the future value function, and it tells you what something is worth in the future. The PV function is what is something worth now, the present value. So the future value function is going to help you establish goals and help you determine how an investment's value changes over time. And the difference between the two, obviously, the payment function is we're going to tell you to um, how to calculate what the payment will be, or based on some interest rates. So we're going to be working with these functions really and trying to determine how can we make the best decision. It is a decision-making tool. I don't think it's exclusively a decision-making tool, but many people use Excel for that very purpose. We want to use some mathematical computations and some actual data to analyze events and make decisions based on that. So be careful about your functions, how they are producing information, what looks right. Integrity is important. So not only do you want to make certain that you put the right function in, but when you look at the output that it gives you, make sure it makes sense. Make sure that the information is put in correctly from a technical point of view, and then determine that your output is what you're looking for. Here are some questions that you'll need to know, that you'll need to review as you're proceeding through this chapter. These are just review. Again, learning how to use the PMT function and how to determine what argument is necessary in different fields, how to interpret the information that Excel provides to you, and understanding how to use the functions, how to create the function that will give you exactly what you need, given a level of assumptions. Chapter 2 is probably the most practical chapter that I've seen. It is practical because it's going to tap into all of the functions commonly used. It introduces a few that we think about and we try to use but have not had opportunities within our workplace or within our personal to use them. We hope in this chapter that you'll find opportunities to use more of these functions to increase your depth of knowledge and the complexity and the efficiencies of your workbooks. And as I said before, thank you very much for your time, and take care.